Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the Football Diary podcast once again. Delayed slightly this week because of the bank holiday weekend. Nonetheless, here we are, me and Dave, to talk through this week's quality round of Premier League action. No Miles, funnily enough, which is weird because Aston Villa lost this week against Arsenal. We won't mention that though, will we, Dave, too much? But a bit of a coincidence that. How are you though, Dave? Are you Ten Hag out already after game week 2?
I wouldn't say so just yet. Obviously, we'll talk about United later, but I thought probably for 70 minutes or so, we weren't actually too bad.
Weren't actually too bad, yeah. Well, we'll discuss United soon, but I think we're going to have to start with Villa, Dave, and Miles will hate us for this, but top of the agenda has to be their game against Arsenal, because I thought it was a fascinating encounter, and I think a lot of people were saying that this was a chance for Arsenal to get some kind of revenge after Villa did the double over them last season, and they did that really, didn't they? 2-0. Flattered Arsenal to a degree, because I thought Villa had a really, really good game up until Arsenal's first goal, and they were their own worst enemies, weren't they? And Ollie Watkins, uncharacteristically, not putting the ball in the back of the net on 2 quite clear occasions. But it was Villa's game to lose up to that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was quite strange in itself, wasn't it, really? 2 real gilt-edge opportunities. I don't even know which was the better chance, because there was, with that kind of gilt-edged, and normally it puts them away. So I don't think you can give him too much flack, and I think what he's obviously done for Villa over the last couple of years, has been such a talisman for them. And I actually thought there were plenty of positives in this performance from Villa. I thought there were like the likes of Morgan Rogers, who obviously Miles has given lots of praise over the last few weeks.
Brilliant
I think
game.
He's starting to announce himself, and I think he's just got that little bit of arrogance, I think, really, that you've got to have, I think, as a younger player, and to be able to sort of announce yourself on this kind of stage. And I love a lot about him. I just think he's got that kind of physicality about him. I think for such quite a big guy, he's quite nimble, and he's got that sort of real quick change of direction, which we saw, like that real bursting run where he skipped by about 3 Arsenal players through the midfield. But yeah, it's just come down to those 2 opportunities, hasn't it, really? Where
you can kind of boil it down to that, can't you?
You really would fancy him to put one of them away. I think the first one, it hits his ankle, doesn't it? It's one of those where he just sort of drags it almost, and it clips his ankle and just dribbles wide. But the second one, it's a great reaction save, but he's got to score that.
Well, he's got to go in the corners, hasn't he? But he heads it almost directly down the middle. I think, assuming Raya won't get back up, but he did pretty quickly.
I think it's the only place you can head the ball in that goal which actually gives the goalkeeper half a chance, because it's within his reach, even though it's such a great reaction save.
But he was on the floor when contact was made. I think that's the thing where you think that was a save.
If he heads it into the ground, it's probably goal.
Yeah.
If he heads it slightly, even a couple of inches to the goalkeeper's left, it's in. It's a certainty. And that probably tips the momentum in Villa's favour, as we've seen at Villa Park over the last few years. They've been really strong there.
You know what really frustrates me is when the camera cuts to Lee Carsley, the interim England manager, watching in the stands to get his reaction to Watkins missing again. I hate it when they do that, because Carsley's in the stands, but I don't think he's going to think any less of Watkins. Watkins has got absolutely nothing to prove, so I don't think we can get too on his case, like you said. But what Lee Carsley will have seen, like you said, Dave, was Morgan Rogers, who had a game of his life, probably his best game in a Villa shirt so far. I mean, Miles said in our season preview that he was definitely one that he can see being given a chance for his national team. Might be coming sooner than later. He touched on a few of his kind of highlights of his performance. He just carries the ball so well in midfield, doesn't he? And I don't know of a player who's made the step up from the Championship to Premier League as comfortably and as quickly as he has. And I thought his finish to the end of last season might have been just a momentum thing, like a bit of a flash in the pan. And that was his level kind of inflated by the bounce of becoming a Premier League player. But he looks right at home at this level, doesn't he?
Yeah, definitely so. I think he's a really interesting one, to be honest, because it will be fascinating to see what kind of player he turns into. Because I think he can offer a lot more goals. I think he's shown, especially in the last couple of seasons, he can get into those positions and finish. So it wouldn't surprise me for him to see him score it, to turn into more of a goal scorer. But I think it's important just not put too much pressure on him.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's not forget, how young he is as a player. If he gets that opportunity at international level, superb. But England are absolutely blessed in those attacking areas. So
Very true.
He's gonna have to really perform this season, I think, to be in contention. That's for sure.
So Rodgers aside, then obviously Villa were pretty much on top. I don't think it's unfair to say for most of that first half, especially. And they're a bit unlucky that Matty Cash had to go after only sort of 15 minutes or so. And it was Nedeljkovic came on. He's only like 20 years old. For me, that kind of swung a little bit in Arsenal's favour when that happened, because they missed that experience, I think, of Cash being on that side. But generally, I thought they looked they were on the front foot quite a lot and took the game to Arsenal. I think Arsenal would have been really worried about this fixture as well. And I think for the first half, they were probably still doubting themselves whether they could turn this into a result. But Villa, obviously missing their chances, helped them out loads. But they can be quite chuffed with what they did, Villa, can't they?
I think so. And, there were two close games last year, really. The one obviously at the end of the season, where Villa, won quite comprehensively and put a really impressive display in. I think it's too early to kind of draw conclusions from this. I do think Villa will look at it as a game which, if they'd have got a point from it, I think they'd have been really happy with that, to be honest. It's still early on in the season. There's still a lot of players, obviously, on the back of international football as well. Have played a lot of football over the summer, not just obviously last season. It's been quite a quick turnaround as well. So they'll be looking, obviously, to bed those new players in. I thought Onana was another player who played really well and really performed in this game. I think he's going to offer a lot to this Villa team.
Yeah, I think the pundits and the media were saying how this was a statement win for Arsenal. I think probably because of the impact that Villa had on their title chances last season. Obviously, winning games kind of cost them the title, essentially, if you look at it that way. Do you see this as a statement win for Arsenal now? Do you think that this was one of the biggest hurdles they could have faced so early in the season? Because the momentum they get from this will be undoubted, won't it? Villa are one of the top teams in the country.
I don't know whether I call it a statement win, because I saw similar games where Arsenal would win in this way last season. Probably didn't have their best games, and that was probably where we saw a shift in mentality from Arsenal from obviously last season to previous seasons, because they would get the job done, and that's what they've done once again. Albeit probably not as convincingly as they would have liked, and the kind of performance that I think Mikel Arteta would have expected of his team. But they were clinical in the moments that they had. The first goal, and you mentioned obviously the young fullback coming on. I do think that kind of shifted a little bit. They seemed to get a little bit joy down that left hand side.
Definitely.
When he came on, I think Martinelli actually got into a couple of really promising positions. But yeah, it was a great goal from Trossard. Really good finish. I think Martinez for the second one will be a little bit disappointed. I'm not going to lie. We'll say it quietly, because I don't want to be criticising Martinez in front of Miles. So, but yeah, I do think he will be a little bit disappointed in himself. He probably didn't save that.
Yeah, I think so. And with the first goal as well, obviously, Leandro Trossard getting the goal with his first touch. And he's got a bit of a reputation now as an impact substitute. But from his celebration or non-celebration, he just kind of stood there mute, didn't he? And for a split second, I thought he maybe played for Villa in the past and didn't want to, celebrate in front of them. But no, he was just annoyed that he wasn't starting. And he came on for, I think it was Martinelli, wasn't it? Two very good players, two very competitive players in a position that Arsenal have kind of blessed him. I think Trossard's probably a better finisher than Martinelli, though. So in some instances, I think he's probably better to start than him, don't you? Because I think in this game, he proved that with his first blooming touch. It was an impact sub of the very highest order, really.
He's a better goal scorer, I think. Obviously, let's not forget that obviously Martinelli is still quite young, so it'll probably come with age. He'll probably become a bit more intelligent in those sort of areas. But Trossard's just got the knack of being in the right place, I think. I think it's really intelligent movement from him coming. That's really kind of obviously coming central in there. And it was a great finish. And it's not the first time, obviously. He scored some really important goals last year as well. He's a different option. He's a different player. And I think he likes to come inside and link play up a little bit more, which sometimes will help Arsenal. Is that obviously they'll obviously with those overloads on the flanks, I think he'll be able to kind of pick that sort of space. So it's, again, we spoke, didn't we, about the options they've got now going forward, Arsenal. And
yeah, well, I think this result is a bit of a statement because those defeats to Villa last season will kind of have been a bit of a monkey on their back. You know, psychologically, if they didn't win this, then suddenly Villa are a bogey team, you know, and suddenly Villa are looking at the table and going, hang on a second, we've just beat Arsenal again. You know, we're serious contenders. So maybe it was a bit of a reality check for Villa that their evolution is still continuing. But I definitely think it's a statement of where Arsenal are right now. And they seem to have hit the ground running quite nicely in the season. You know, they've got the likes of Timber coming back, who started the game. Calafiori came on for him as well and made himself known, I think it's fair to say, and got in a few faces. So they do look like a better team than last season, I think. Even if they lose someone like Nketiah, which it looks like they're going to, they don't look short of goals. They look like a real attacking, threatening team, don't they?
well, they're developing quite a strong spine. I think that's the main thing. If you look right through the centre of defence, through to the midfield, and probably the only area we mentioned that they still lack a little bit is probably in that forward area, and probably just having a natural finisher, natural goal scorer, which, you know, Kai Havertz has done superbly well to kind of contribute in terms of goals and things like that. But I think they probably do lack a sort of like an Ivan Toney sort of player who can pick up those areas and provide, you know, I think make that sort of territory his own. That might change again, obviously, in the next year. Obviously, the opportunity's probably not been there in the transfer market for them to do that sort of business. Obviously, Ivan Toney's been on the market. We yet to see it to know. Kind of looks like he's been linked to Chelsea today, just like every other player on the.
Which bizarrely makes a lot of sense. I think Tony to Chelsea seems to feel like more of what they need rather than being linked to Jadon Sancho. I don't know where Jadon Sancho is going to fit in at Chelsea. But keeping it on Arsenal, do you think they do need anyone? Is it just the striker you think they're missing now to make it almost a complete kind of puzzle, really?
I think so. Obviously, they've just brought Marino in as well, haven't they? I think he's quite a good addition for them.
Great midfielder.
And I probably would have said earmarked that as being an area where they probably didn't have enough kind of backup there. Obviously, Thomas Partey obviously scored a good goal, but it does seem, I think I would worry a little bit if Declan Rice did get injured and they didn't have another player of kind of his ilk who'd be able to come in and just kind of support that sort of role.
So Arsenal winning, good start to the season, 2-2 so far. It's early days, and obviously we don't want to blow anything out of proportion, but it looks positive for them. For Villa, I think the message is still don't panic, isn't it, really?
Yeah, they don't want to be panicking. I mean, it's obviously very early on. It's a tough game. It's a tough game to have. It's your second game in. And I'm sure they'll be looking to kind of end this little period. We're already talking about an international break. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
But if they can get a win in the next game and just obviously end on a positive note.
We're going to delve into Chelsea winning 6-2 against Wolves and a statement win, statement really, I guess, from a Chelsea perspective, where they're kind of proving doubters wrong, they would say. And a really, really positive performance from Noni Madueke, Dave, who prior to the game obviously didn't have much to say positive about Wolves, did he? Bit of a backtrack, I think, in the post-match where he made his apologies known, because I think he described Wolves in pretty negative terms, didn't he? But the result for Chelsea will be really important, because I think for me, seeing that link up between Madueke especially and Palmer and seeing what they could bring, and then seeing obviously João Felix come on for his second debut and grab a goal was really important, I think, for Enzo Maresca. This felt like the start of the Maresca era in some ways, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think I actually thought it was quite a positive performance. I think if you look at it was probably slightly flatter in the scoreline. And if you look at the stats, I know the XG, I think the Chelsea was like less than 2 and they scored 6. So
yeah,
it massively overperformed that. But they were just so clinical. I actually thought a lot of their play was a lot quicker. They were more incisive, I think, and just absolutely ruthless. And they did just take Wolves apart at times. Again, they had quite a few chances themselves.
Yeah,
I thought Matheus Cunha looked really, really threatening throughout the game, caused them plenty of problems. But I do think it's really encouraging, to be honest, for Enzo Maresca. And this performance from Chelsea, I think what it does show is there's plenty to work with.
That's an understatement. He's got loads to work with.
If you look at the amount of bodies in that squad. there's plenty to work with and to work on, I think, defensively as well, because they did look a little bit. They got pulled apart a little bit at times by Wolves. So I do think he'll be looking at that and looking to make some improvements there. But again, there's some great goals scored in this.
Yeah,
Cole Palmer's goal,
brilliant goal,
such a great finish.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you say, most of them were really impressively either build-ups or finishes or a bit of both. And I looked at the halftime score and thought 2-2. You know, this is a really competitive game. Wolves have really got a chance here against an unknown quantity Chelsea team. We don't know what the best of Chelsea is, really, do we? But we saw the best of Chelsea in that second half. Like, out of nowhere, they just sprung an absolute surprise on Wolves, who didn't have an answer. It'd be slightly worrying for Gary O'Neill, I think, to see his team kind of capitulate a bit like that. But like you say, for Maresca to see Palmer, hat-trick of assists for Madueke, and for someone like Madueke to be considered maybe as a starter now, hopefully, because I've got a lot of time for him. I think he's a good guy, really, first of all. I think he's really well-spoken, presents himself well off the field, which Chelsea need because their PR has been atrocious lately. But on the field, to see him do that is really impressive too. I think Chelsea need all the help they can get, really, to make themselves look like a club that's stable, first of all. And I think those two players in Palmer and Madueke continuing that partnership for the next few games is important. But also just having some kind of identity. I feel like they need players who they can say they're Chelsea players, because there's so many players in there. It's hard to kind of get on side with any of them as a Chelsea fan, I bet, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the thing now, is there's been a loss of connection between fan
100%.
base and probably some of the players in the team. Obviously, having that identity there it's sort of obviously being muddled in a way. And I think there's a lot of frustration there. I think there's a lot of frustration from fans because all these names they're being linked with in the transfer market. You say, it's just why? Why did they need another player in that position? Why did they need another body there? You just kind of wonder what direction the club is going in. What are the recruitment team thinking? Or is this higher than that? Who's making these decisions? Because, you know, it's frankly quite ludicrous. So, yeah, like the likes of Noni Madueke, who's got bags of talent, I really enjoy watching him play. He's quite a different kind of forward, and he's quite unpredictable in some of his creative play. He will kind of obviously go down the outside, or he can cut in onside, and he's got a great shot on him as well. So be interesting to see how it does. And I think Miles said a few weeks ago, actually, he thought Madueke might have quite a good season. So it'd be a good shout if it turns out to be the case. But yeah, it's interesting times at Chelsea for some positive reasons, but also some quite confusing situations ongoing as well.
Yeah, it is. Until they actually show us what their recruitment kind of direction is, then it just looks like scattergun, doesn't it? They're signing players because they want them. But I'm sure there won't be any shortage of takers for the players that are in there, like bomb squad, for example, because there's 15 players or something just been isolated and put up for sale. I can't see them getting much money for them, to be fair, by publicly stating they're there for sale. Can you?
I think that's really sad, though, as well in itself. Yeah. And the manager coming out, and I don't think that's the right thing to do, personally.
I was going to say, actually, Maresca, what do you think of his approach? Because he's been pretty blunt, hasn't he, about I will pick the team that I need. I work with the smaller squad of 21 and no more. And he criticised Mykhailo Mudryk in this game as well for, not being the end product and, not being on the right wavelength. And he's pretty brutal, isn't he? And I know Leicester fans and players didn't particularly take to him that much because he is quite a black and white character, isn't he? He doesn't seem like anything like Poch was like, for example, where the players loved him.
Yeah, he got a lot of flack from Leicester fans, I think, for their style of play at times. Wasn't the most appealing, I think, to some fans, and also a lot of fans would say he lacks a plan B if it's not going his way. It will be interesting to see if when that pressure builds, because it will at some point.
Yeah, I don't think Chelsea tends to, doesn't it? At some point,
they're not going to have it all their own way. It will be interesting to see how he deals with that. But I didn't like how he put all that limelight on, X number of players that weren't training with the first team. That's, for me, that's not right. And it just lacks a bit of respect, I think.
I think so. Do you know what it reminds me of? It already feels like you're playing a game of Football Manager when you're watching Chelsea. But also, when you play Football Manager, you literally just cast players to the reserves if they're no good. You look at their stats and go, no, not for me. It feels like he's doing that Maresca a little bit, where
It's got
he's playing with them.
I think it's got a little bit of a feeling of how Mourinho used to deal with players at times.
It's quite cold.
Yeah. And I just think that kind of man management style sometimes in this day and age, it doesn't always necessarily work. And I think with a lot of the egos in there, let's not forget, I think there'll be a few in there who are quite pally with each other and probably don't agree with that sort of management of the players.
Yeah, interesting one to keep an eye on, Chelsea. But another team that would be thrilled with a win, a much needed win as well, Dave, is Nottingham Forest. Moved them up to 5th in the Premier League table, which will take some getting used to. I'm not sure how long Forest can hold on to that. But answered a few questions against a quite weak Southampton team, I think it's fair to say. But what do you make of Nottingham Forest so far, Dave? They've divided opinion, I think, with their sort of, weakness at the back and their tendency to kind of collapse under pressure. Obviously, split opinion on Nuno Espirito Santo. Morgan Gibbs-White scored in this game. Chris Woods had a decent start to the season as well. Have they got enough there to really make a push for the top 10 maybe, or at least mid-table and move away from relegation?
I think what we did say is when Ronyi is not in there, I think they do need another striker. And I think obviously they've been looking at Eddie Nketiah, haven't they?
Which would make sense, I think. You can see that working for their style.
Yeah, and I think his style of play and I think the way he's able to connect, I think he'd actually build quite a good relationship with the likes of Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs-White, Anthony Elanga. I think that'll be quite a good front four. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Again, on the balance of the game, I think they had 23 shots, 8 on target, which I think was the most, of a team this weekend, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a lot, isn't it, to only get one goal out of that?
It kind of reeks of a familiar sort of pattern to the times last year when they would have a lot of chances, but they weren't really changing, obviously, that dominance that they had, creating goals from it. And again, it's similar. I think they had quite a lot of opportunities in this game where they really should have killed it off. And you might get away with it. You might get away with it on the odd occasion this year, but they're going to play a lot better teams than Southampton, so they've got to just make sure that they're making it count.
It's weird because Southampton have again had dominant possession, 65% of the ball in this game, and Forest are quite happy to concede the ball to them because they're nowhere near clinical as well. But like you say, Forest are not going to have that inviting an opponent, are they, going forward? So is it a case of more signings? Because I don't know how much money Forest have got to spend. They've got to tread a very careful line, haven't they? And I guess they've got to sell before they can buy if they do that as well. They've already got somebody like Elliot Anderson in the midfield who cost them a pretty penny, really. So can they really afford to go out and buy a striker, for example?
I suppose if they're obviously there's murmurs of it happening, there must be some kind of leeway there. And I mean, there might potentially be manoeuvre there in terms of sales still. Again, it's the window's obviously hasn't closed yet, so I'm sure they'll be able to make it work. It's just a case of whether they've got enough money to suit, obviously, Arsenal's. I think they're after over 30 million, which is a lot. It's a lot of money.
It is.
Considering Nketiah didn't actually play a lot of football last year for a striker that evidently they don't need, even though I don't think it was that long back that he signed a new contract, which is obviously looking like the wrong decision now. But I think it's asking a bit much. So whether they can get that fee down a little bit, I think it would be in their best interest too, to be honest, because I think 30 million is a lot.
What did you make of their performance in this game? Because obviously they opened the season with a draw, disappointed with the draw as well, but a win kind of puts a gloss on their start, doesn't it? Like I say, it puts them in 5th in the table after 2 games, which you can't really read anything into. But did you see anything there to make you think there's a makings of a coherent team? Because obviously loads of chances created, right?
Yeah, I think particularly Sangare, I thought he had a really good game. Obviously had some troubles last season, obviously was missing for a good portion of it, so it was good to see him back in there and stamping his authority in that midfield. I thought Anthony Elanga looked really good again. Obviously, his debut season last year, he came in and really made an impact in this team. So it'd be interesting to see if he can go from strength to strength, because he just provides such a threat. He's so direct on that flank. But I really liked that relationship that they had built last season. Gibbs, White, Alanga, and Hudson-Odoi. I think there's real potential there. And it'll be interesting to see if Nuno can get the most out of them. Like you say, they didn't have a great deal of possession in this game, but that's not really the kind of manager that Nuno is either. I think some of the transitional play was really promising.
That's what they thrive on, I think, is sitting deeper and kind of soaking up pressure and then attacking at speed. And they've got players who can really work quickly in transition as well, like you say. And I think the best of Forest last season was when they did that really effectively. And also when Awoniyi was at the spearhead of it. So he needs to kind of get in the team and on form again and to full fitness as quickly as he can, because I think if they get Awoniyi firing, it does suddenly make much more sense the way Forest play, especially with the Nuno style, don't you think?
It takes pressure off those strikers as well. Obviously, if Chris Wood's your only guy in there who's got to score the goals, then they just need bodies. They need options, and if they can get another striker in and get obviously when you're back in there, then that'll be great for Forest.
Right, Dave. Manchester United 1, Brighton 2. It feels like a bit of a bogey team for us at the minute, Brighton, doesn't it? But I know it's hard when you've been hit with a 95th minute winner from the opposition. And I think the way Brighton scored their second goal in the amount of space that we left in behind for them to what was like a queue of 3 players who could have finished that little chip in the end. It's really disappointing because for the majority, United played really well and had some really good performances from a few players as well. So how are you feeling after seeing that, mate?
It's just really frustrating. I think even more so because it was on my first wedding anniversary as well. So it didn't exactly sweeten the mood for the rest of that afternoon. Actually, try and cheer myself up.
Spoiled his anniversary.
But yeah, it was some of it actually. Some of the passages of play were quite promising. I thought particularly in the first half we had enough chances to be winning, to go in half time and to be ahead probably by a couple of goals. Not just creating chances, but quality chances as well. I thought Ahmad had a little bit of a poor first half, if I'm being honest, and probably in the areas where it's probably his strongest sort of trait of making the right decisions and his weight of pass and passing at times.
But he can be forgiven for an extent, can't he?
He had a bereavement, didn't he, as well, apparently. I think a stepmom that passed away as well, so that might have been weighing on his conscience. But then I thought there were plenty of positives in there as well.
Yeah.
I think Mazraoui continues to look like a really good addition.
What a player,
and looks like it gives us that sort of balance as well, in between attack and defence. And I think he's just got that intelligence where he knows where to place himself positionally in the game. And I think he takes up that really important role where he comes in field and sort of adds another body to midfield, which I think Ten Hag likes. And he knows obviously he can play his way of playing. There are certainly moments in the game which we've not been alien to. And I think we know probably what I'm about to say is after 65 minutes, we just become so open in that midfield area. And it looks like potentially we might be about to look to improve that. And obviously we're bringing Manuel Ugarte in, who looks like he might potentially be a starter in this team.
I think so, because I think his stats kind of scream energetic midfielder, and we need some energy in that midfield. It's really lacking. Obviously, we've lost Scott McTominay now, particularly going to Napoli as well, so he's not even going to be in the Premier League anymore. I think he was underrated and undervalued by United fans. I thought he brought a lot to the forward play as well. So that energy has to be matched, and those goals need to be matched as well from somewhere as well, because he scored quite a few last season. And obviously we've lost Aaron Wan-Bissaka, so there's some good squad players we're losing. So to have a player like Ugarte, who's 23, and if you look at his stats on paper, the stats bombs you can see where you've got them overlapping against another comparable player. He's closer to Declan Rice than you'd imagine, but slightly better at recovering possession and things like that. So it looks like a really tenacious option in midfield, which we need, don't we, really?
I don't think he will probably bring as much in terms of obviously going forward. I think his progressive passing probably could improve, and I think probably given the licence to do that, it could. But I do think, like you say, our trouble is at the moment in midfield, we haven't got the legs to sustain that sort of pressure. Pressing high and being able to really drive up and down the pitch. You look at Mainu, I think he really needs to improve on his stamina levels, I think, for a game. But I think as well, we're taking away some of his strengths further up the field. I think he's having to cover too much ground at times.
Yeah.
And Casemiro just hasn't got the legs after about 60 minutes.
Well, you look to the bench as well, don't you? And you see, obviously, the likes of Christian Eriksson, and you just think they're not going to bring much energy either, really, at their age.
No, and I think that was a real problem last season for us. Losing 100%. Control of games and losing control of midfield. Okay, not necessarily control as in keeping possession, retaining possession, but I think managing situations and knowing when to keep the ball in certain areas of the pitch, but having players in the right position as well, which, you know, clearly we look really out of sorts, I think, in that back end of that game.
Yeah, do you know, for the Brighton winner as well, when the ball came in, and was it João Pedro nodded it in? There was only one of three Brighton players that could have scored it or marked, and De Ligt was on the pitch at the time. It felt like he had his eye on all three of them, but just couldn't get to any of them because he was trying to cover for other teammates. So positionally, there's a lot of work to do at the back. But I think Ugarte being there will add a bit of character to just the defensive steel we've got, because him and Martinez, they're both quite up and at players, aren't they? They're both quite gritty, quite determined. They've got a reputation for being quite physical too. I think that's the makings of a really sort of solid spine there if we can get it all working.
Yeah, I think Ugarte, he's definitely got that sort of strong initiative in terms of sensing danger and looking to kind of win the ball in 50-50 challenges, looking to get to the ball before the player who's receiving it into feet. I think will definitely improve in those areas. So it's going to be fascinating to see him come in actually, and to see actually whether he's actually given a bit of time to sort of bed in, or whether they're going to throw him straight in at the deep end. Because to be honest, I think we might have to make a change against Liverpool this weekend.
Yeah, well, it's a different prospect against Liverpool than it has been, hasn't it? We don't know what kind of Liverpool we're going to face, and they don't really know what kind of United they're going to face either. It's going to be a fascinating one. But the last word on United, Dave, the disallowed goal, how unlucky was that? Obviously, by the letter of the law, Joshua Zirkzee gets a knee on it, on the line, and he's in an offside position, so it's ruled out, despite the fact it makes no difference to the ball going in. Gutting way to lose a game, isn't it? Having that goal as the kind of the one that would have won the game, you think, based on momentum, just ruled out like that.
Yeah, and I think it could have slightly changed our approach if that had been onside.
Probably.
It did feel like that was like the moment when the momentum did shift, and it did look more likely like Brighton were going to get the winner. It did seem a little bit sort of one way towards the end of the game, and I think we struggled, even though we did create, I think, a couple of half chances. It seemed like Brighton would be the more likely to go and win, and obviously they did. But the goal itself, I mean, you can't be much more unlucky, can you? Obviously, Garnacho missed that open goal in the first game. He's just had a goal disallowed, no fault of his own.
Yeah.
You've got to feel for him, to be honest, because he probably should have 2 goals.
Well, yeah,
in his first 2 games of the season.
They had to slow it down to almost like the last frame before the ball went in. And that's the time it made contact, literally the last minute before the ball crossed the line. I think it was 2/3 over the line. So that last third of the ball being in play still meant it was offside. Absolutely gutting. But okay, one more word on United, actually, while we're on it. Links with Raheem Sterling. I mean, I've made this quite clear on X that if you don't see how that's problematic for United fans to see the former City and Liverpool player joining us, then you're misguided at best, really. I think that's a ridiculous connection to make. Why is he being linked to United, do you think?
It's an opportunity that's arisen. for obviously, Chelsea have made no secret of it. They want him out the door, albeit not in the most respectful manner at all. But I think, for me, it kind of has feelings of obviously the past when we've brought players in at the back end of the career when it's not the right time.
Yeah.
Again,
I agree.
Ignoring his links to some of our rivals, but I think he was a boyhood United fan as well, which is quite funny. I don't know if this really says more about the state of the club itself, but I think he'd probably be our most threatening winger.
Yeah.
I think he'd probably be our most dangerous winger if it was starting, which says a lot more about Marcus Rashford, though. I think
I was going to say
Rashford
once again had a stinker and didn't really get punished for it by the coach, did he? He keeps getting given minutes. So word on Brighton then, Dave, because obviously they deserve kind of some attention really for another great win. They're second in the league now, behind only to Man City. Fabian Hurzeler has had a great start to life at the club, hasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I think in terms of, if you look at, I think there's been a little bit of change in the style of play. It looks like they're going a little bit more direct, and there's probably less of an emphasis, I think, on possession. Which it seemed like there was more so obviously in the De Zerbi era. But I don't think fans will be arguing too much about their start to the season. I think there was a lot of confusion in sort of the direction they were going last season. Obviously they had that really bad run, didn't they? Where they really struggled to get points. But it seems like, obviously, with getting players back in, obviously Karol Matoma, obviously back in the team. I think the likes, obviously, João Pedro.
Yeah, Minte looked good as well. I think he looks like a decent signing.
Yeah, I think he looked good in the first game as well. I think really promising.
I forgot to sign Jorginho Rutter as well from Leeds. So they've got some attacking talent there.
I think that's a great signing for me. I've really liked the look of him at Leeds, and I just think that this direction they're going, obviously with younger players, giving players opportunity, but they've just got a great model there, a great football model, haven't they?
Yeah. We're about out of time now, Dave. So any other games in the Premier League catch your eye this weekend?
I think one team, which we probably would have been wondering about, obviously, Dominic Solanke's departure from the club, how that would affect Bournemouth, but they've probably carried on right where they left off. I think they look really impressive against Newcastle.
Yeah.
I think Evan Nilsson's look like he's going to be a great addition. He really caused them issues at times. It looks like he's going to give them more to the team in terms of his off the ball movement, in terms of help him out with that press. The way that they were able to regain possession a number of times in the final third was really impressive.
It's funny though. I asked Miles about Bournemouth last week and said, "Are you worried about them at all? Do you think they could be like sliding into relegation contention?" He went, "Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I'd be concerned." But I think that was premature. Obviously, it's the first couple of games of the season. But like you say, I think a great sign in there. I think Semenyo looks really positive as well. He had a great season last season. I agree. I think Bournemouth have got the makings of a great established Premier League team. They just need to add an extra little bit of sparkle in there to replace Solanke in some ways, don't they?
Yeah, and I mean, it would take time to sort of build some sort of consistency in there, I think. But I think their style of play is well identified. That really perform quite consistently in that sense. And I think Hurzeler's done a great job so far. I think
absolutely robbed though in this game. How was that goal ruled out?
Just lost for words. There's two big decisions, wasn't there? And they probably got both. They got both wrong.
They did.
In my opinion, they definitely got the goal wrong, because for me, there is no way you can say he's definitely handballed that, because you can't from any angle, you can't see that that's 100% hit his arm. So I don't understand why they've overturned it. And then the red card, for me, I think it was a red card. But the non-red card, should I say? I
was going to say, the thing the red card with the handball, it was about the position on the sleeve as well, like whereabouts on the sleeve represents the arm, and where is it safe and where is it not. If you can't make your mind up, it's not a handball. I
think one of the Sky pundits actually made a really good point there as well. Is the power that's generated off of it? You probably wouldn't see that if it came off of the arm. No. It'd probably bobble along the ground.
In live action, you wouldn't see it.
No.
So absolutely gutting. Yeah, gutting way to lose 2 points.
Yeah, it's a real shame, to be honest, because we all want to see an improvement in officiating, in VAR decisions as well. And it's only taken us to get to game week 2, where we're probably already seeing one of the worst decisions of the season. We'll probably get to the end of the season and
they'll be worse.
Have 1 to 10, and it'll be right up there.
Yeah, no, there will be worse. I think we've got a lot of contentious ones where I think it will go to VAR, and you'll be like, why has it still been decided that VAR should go that way and not that way? And if VAR can't make a decision definitively, then what's the point of VAR, basically? But let's not bore listeners with that. I think that's like we could go on and on, couldn't we? But that's it for this week's pod. Thank you for joining us. If you do like what you hear or see, please do hit like and subscribe on all of our socials and on YouTube as well. But we'll finish by just paying tribute to the late Sven-Goran Eriksson, who passed away this week. Obviously, we know he had terminal cancer. He was on a tour of kind of his previous clubs, wasn't he? And really sad to see, I don't know, him accepting his fate in some ways, but also great and heartwarming to see the kind of football community's reaction to his role in European football, Dave, isn't it?
Yeah, what a guy. I think obviously what he's given to the footballing world, there's no words more words that we can say about him as a man and a manager. And I think it's sad to actually look back to see how he got treated at times as the England boss. I think how he got treated by the media, because I actually think he did quite, a really respectful job. But I just think it really shows us, doesn't it, that there's so much more to life than football.
Absolutely,
and it does strike home.
On that poignant note, thank you, Dave. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in this week. We've got a bit of a break in the week now, I think, with Carabao Cup action. But we'll be back next week, no doubt, with Miles, hopefully, to talk about the next wave of Premier League fixtures. Until then, speak to you soon, Dave.
See you again. Let's have a win at the weekend.
Yeah.